Welcome back, and this is the last video that we have in this beginner's guide to yin yoga. So I'm going to introduce you to a muscle that is often referred to as, especially in yoga, the soul of the body. So a little bit wonky here. So this muscle is called the psoas, and it's actually spelled P-S-O-A-S. So with the psoas muscle, can cause a lot of issues for people. Just going to turn this around. In terms of backache and, yeah, just all sorts. So the muscle actually connects to the lower back over there. And then what it does is it'll travel, your muscle, it attaches to a few of the vertebrae there, and it travels to the front. It comes over that hip joint and attaches to the front of the hip, the thigh bone. Now, for most people, because we sit, this muscle, and I'm going to use the term shrink. It's in proper anatomy terms, that isn't what happens, but in layman's terms, just to help you get an understanding, it shrinks because we don't need to have a long muscle when we sat down in that position. So the body, what we'll do over years and years and years, is start to shorten the muscle because it takes a lot of energy for the body to, keep muscles alive and have muscle. And if we're not using it, the body's going to make it disappear so that it uses less energy to look after the muscle. So it gets quite tight. Now, as a result, what happens is it starts to pull the spine forward. And then that is one of the issues why people have sore lower backs. They have lower backache, especially for those that sit a lot, or perhaps pregnancy also does this. If you've got a really big belly, or poor posture can do that as well. Now, the problem with the psoas muscle is actually quite a hard muscle to stretch, but there's a few poses in the yin practice that we can do to stretch it off. But so sometimes you might be feeling this discomfort in your lower back when you're in a certain position, so maybe in front lying, and you've got your hands supporting your body, and you say, oh my God, that's really hurting my lower back. It's because this is being stretched, and the body doesn't like it. So unless you've been diagnosed with some kind of spinal issue, you're not doing any harm. In fact, you're doing this muscle loads of good. It's just that because it's so awkward to get to, it doesn't feel very comfortable. They call it the soul of the body because of where it's situated. Whenever you experience some kind of trauma, you tend to do that. When you're cold, you tend to do that. And even doing that will help to shrink this muscle. Okay, it's called shortening the muscle. So when I mentioned about crying in one of the other videos, sometimes when we come into working with this particular muscle, it can cause these emotional releases that you have in the body. And you might not even have a clue as to why that's happened. You might know, you might not know. But when I refer to trauma, I'm not talking about, well, I am talking about trauma as we think of trauma, but you could have been 7 years old and shouted at by your school teacher. That could be trauma. Maybe you lost your dog. That could be trauma. Maybe you had a big, you lost your doll. When you're 6 or 7 years old, that is trauma. So try and move away from this idea that had to be something awful that happened in your life. Especially between the ages 0 to 7, that's where a lot of our current limiting beliefs, things that hold us back, a lot of it comes from those first 7 years. It's quite impactful, the first 7 years of our life. So if I ever refer to the psoas muscle within the yin classes, then you know which muscle I'm referring to. So I wanted to speak to you about this one in particular. So it needs a lot of stretching. It's a very hard muscle to get to. So if you ever go to a physical therapist, like a sports massage, they've really got to dig in just inside the hip bone here. And it can be, if someone does my right side, it's like, it can be very, very painful. And the other thing that you might get is there's some stretches that we do, and because yin yoga we tend to hold the pose, You might not notice it that much, but sometimes you get a clicking in the hip. And what's happened is this muscle is flicking over this little part over here. So again, you're not doing any harm. It's just, it doesn't feel very nice, or it's a bit like the anticipation of, oh, it's going to happen. Like I said, because we tend to hold the poses in yin, it doesn't happen all that often, but just in case you find this, it's called the snapping hip syndrome or clicking hip syndrome, and it's this muscle. So that is the psoas. I just wanted to have a little brief introduction about that, just so you know why you get that discomfort in your back, especially when you're lying on your front. It's because we're putting that muscle into a stretch when we're lying on our front, and it's just like, oh, the back's pulling. But again, this is why yin yoga is such a nice form of exercise for this, because it, although it's uncomfortable, it's gentle. So I'll see you in our workouts. I hope you found this beginner's guide helpful, and let's get started with our sessions. See you on the mat.